said plethora
and cornucopia.
paucity.
Paucity.
I think actually cornucopia would be better than
Paucity. What does paucity mean?
lack of. There's a paucity of chicken tenders.
Paucity. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Jeff Rock, and welcome to another D. Hilton Associates webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing an extremely important topic, of course, CEO succession planning trends going forward and what we're looking at in industry. We're going to plan for about 40 minutes to 45 minutes or so to have this discussion, but at any point in time, please feel free to chat in. We'll be here to answer some questions, or if you would like to dig into something a little bit deeper, we're going to save a little bit of time at the end there. We're also going to be sending out a survey after this. Let us know how we're doing, what you liked, what you didn't like, anything you would like to see, or any questions that we didn't get to. Additionally, about 3 to 5 business days after this airing, we're going to have this posted on our website. Please feel free to go there. It's at dhilton.com/webinars. You'll be able to see some of our other webinars as well. Lots of great content to go through there. So please take time to go through that. Might be some good answers for you on that side there. Without further ado, go ahead and dig right in. Want to be able to introduce David Hilton. How are you, David?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Jeff?
Doing absolutely wonderful. And also joining us is John Andrews. How are you, John?
I'm doing great. I just need to tell our audience that 5 minutes ago it was a pretty hefty debate on chicken nuggets. So thanks for elevating the discussion here.
We really bring the tough topics when we start talking about these things.
So we're gonna pivot. How's that?
All right, pivoting on to something not as important as chicken nuggets. John, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And I'm doing fine too, by the way.
I just assumed you're doing fantastic.
Okay. So what we've seen from our clients this year when the regulators have come a-calling, it's been real interesting that succession planning has been on the list. They want to see the plans. They want to see them executed. They want to see updates. And we've gotten calls at least once a week from somebody saying, is there something that you can help us out with? And one of the things we think about today is, whose court is it in? Who has the ownership of it? So today's presentation we're going to make the case that CEO succession planning and all the stuff that goes with it, it really lies with the board, and it's a legitimate responsibility. And when we see a good governance model, we typically see that the board has good ownership of that process and not one and done. So we're going to talk about that today. So we got a few slides for you. And as we say, death, taxes, and all CEOs will leave. It's a thing that you have this relationship, and you'd love the CEO if it's working well to last. Leave and not leave and last forever, and they don't. And so, David, you've been a CEO, you left, and you've had friends that have left, and we've had recruiting assignments left. What have you seen?
Well, I like to go back one step, and that is to when I was not a CEO. And I won't name the name of the credit union I was at, but I worked my way up to the number 2 position. Yeah. And at the number 2 position, I did not go to board meetings. And as a matter of fact, no one went to board meetings except for the CEO. But when the CEO was out of town or sick or was not able to attend, that was my job, was to fill in at the board meeting. And the board didn't take me very serious, because they knew that I wasn't going to be there for the other 11 board meetings. So they got to know me, but they got to know me from a social point of view, not from a business point of view.
Did he get to how fast we can get this over with?
Oh, absolutely.
Like a NASCAR pit stop?
David's
in charge. Okay, let's do this in 10 minutes.
And it was all trick questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They had a whole bunch of trick questions waiting for me. It was as best big a joke as they could make it.
Oh, great.
So that was my exposure to board meetings, and I realized that if they're never going to take me serious, because the CEO is never going to let me go to board meetings and really expose me to the board, then I'm never going to be the CEO there. Or if I am, I'm going to be lucky and get the CEO position. But I wasn't going to get the CEO position because I knew something. It was because I just happened to be the only one there. Yeah, default. That's a good word.
Okay, so take the next day. So board meeting happens Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. You go to your boss and say, "How did it go? Did you get any feedback, or was it like a teenager saying, "Fine"?
Fine.
There was no
That was school.
There was no feedback. There was no questions asked. There's no questions answered. It was just basically, okay, you did it.
It's a Wednesday.
That's it. It's Wednesday.
They didn't take minutes; they took seconds. Let's get this
Right.
over.
And that's our first dad joke of the day.
Hooray! One and done. I'm out.
There'll be a few of those.
So getting on to that situation,
Yeah.
I realized that if I was going to be a CEO somewhere, it was not going to be there.
Yeah.
And I started looking for another credit union, someplace close, because I really didn't want to be that far away
Right.
from family and friends. And I did find another position as a CEO, and that changed my entire career events. And I stayed there for quite a while. But the difference was I let my entire team into the board meetings.
Right.
My entire team went to the planning session. My entire team went to anything that was a board function, so that they could get to know the board, and the board could get to know them.
But sometimes that's a transparency some CEOs are reluctant to give, or the board doesn't want to give. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. Again, from my own experiences, it was more the CEO didn't want to give.
Yeah.
But it certainly can be the other way around. The board didn't want to give either. And in our experiences over the last 38 years, it certainly has been that way both ways. With a little bit leaning towards the CEO doesn't want to give.
Well, we're at 5 once-in-a-lifetime financial crises, and we see these. One of the steps, it's not denial, but it's like, can you stay 3 more years and get us through this next economic period, or this trouble with a sponsor or something local? And you've seen that too, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That is it's an unsaid discussion. A lot of times what happens is the board feels that they'd like the CEO to stay 3 more years,
Yeah.
but the CEO feels the same way.
Yeah.
I'd like to stay 3 more years to get us through this. And all of a sudden 65 turns out to be 68,
Yeah.
and 68 turns out to be 71, and 71 turns out to be 74. How's my accounting?
Pretty good.
Good, thank you.
We're on point.
Okay.
So, yeah, and what I've seen in that case is, and you've told me this before, you've had people tell you that the day that I announce that I want to retire, the relationship changes. So I'm reluctant to give you D-date as a CEO to a board because of am I still relevant or something like that?
Well, that works both ways also. I'm reluctant to give you a date because the relationship changes between the CEO and the board, but also it's reluctancy because of the CEO and the C-suite people. There's a reluctancy there too as well. And that becomes a problem because now everybody is vying for the CEO position, and all of a sudden the C-suite doesn't get along.
Yeah, one of the first assignments you gave me when I started with the company, it was co-CEOs. A board had co-CEOs, and they wanted to redo the organizational structure, and it was kind of like the Hunger Games.
Yeah,
it both went to the board meeting. They didn't share information, and CUNA, I think actually the magazine wrote, "What a great novel management concept."
Yeah, it's a terrible concept in my opinion,
Yeah.
and the reason it's a terrible concept is, who do you go to?
Yeah.
And for what reason do you go?
Yeah.
And someone has to make the decision.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work out that the two someones look at each other and say, yeah, that's the right decision to make. We should do this jointly.
Yeah. And every time those guys pushed off another 3 years, they had a chance of losing what they thought was a potential successor, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. The C-suite looks at that and says, okay, well, he's 52 and she's 57. What do we do now? We're going to be here for the longer of the two, or am I going to be there for the shorter of the two? I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. So, you've done research at least a decade on supply and demand. Where's the next generation of leaders coming from? Are they going to be that classic smaller credit union CEO to a bigger CEO? Is it going to come from in-house versus out-of-house? And one of the things that we've seen pretty traditional has been a majority of CEOs this year are still going to be first timers.
They're first timers. They're not necessarily first time CEOs,
Right.
but they're first timers at their new credit union. They're CEOs that are C-suite in the CFO position, the C-suite in the HR position, the C-suite in the operations position, but they're C-suite people for the most part.
Yeah. And, you know, I remember earlier in my career, it's like if I looked at a resume, I know a board member was going to ask me, well, do they have CEO experience? Or I don't want to look at this person. And you just don't have that luxury today.
No, there is no luxury to do that. You know, you have to look at people who are as well-rounded as they possibly can be. Most people come up into the C-suite positions, and they only know what
They're gurus, right?
they know.
They're technical.
That's it. They're
experts.
technical experts, and they have to be very, very savvy to create a career path that includes having ALM position, ALM understanding, position of understanding of savings and loans and things of that nature.
Well, that's one of my pet peeves is sometimes I see this technique where, okay, CEO wanting to be a good coach, mentor of their underlings and say, look, you're awesome on the accounting ALM side, but we need to get you into operations. So they just totally shut them down and move them over.
Well, that happens all the time.
And my pet peeve with that is I just took a really good person and I maybe diluted our overall effort because I'm sink or swim.
Absolutely. There's no question that that's a problem.
So what's your fix on that?
The fix is I think the board has to give these people a chance to either learn how to do some of the things that they're not able to do today by either moving them into other positions or at least getting them some education or some classes so that they are a little bit more well-rounded.
I mean, it's the experience, but not total ownership of it, forsaking what they were good at.
That's correct.
Right.
You don't want to dilute the whole company
That's the word I was
by
looking for,
moving
yeah.
everybody around. This is not musical chairs.
Right. And you've seen that too, Jeff, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And with our clients, when you talk to folks, they're like, you know, I look at your background and then why are you doing this? And the answer typically is,
You know,
I'm on some type of rotation. Get me out of here.
Yeah. Help, please help.
Help me. Right? So one of the things that we look at is we know that's not going to change. Your prediction for the next, let's call it 5 or 6 years, are we still on that boat of the shortage?
Yeah, we're still short for the next 5 years. Now, the shortage is not anywhere near as bad as it was 5 years ago. We've seen a ton of retirements, and we're going to see more retirements as time goes on, but not at the same rate as we've seen them in the past.
So let me just one more prediction here is like, okay, in the old days, it was, oh, they've been a CEO of a $250 million credit. Now they're going to be graded a $500 million or a $750. You know, that was maybe the progression we were looking for. Now, because they've got that first shot on LinkedIn, it says they're president of a $500 million credit union. That board needs to protect that turf because they're going to start to get the calls now that, hey, I've done this for 3 to 5 years. I've got great financials. We've doubled the business, and now I'm on the radar.
Going back to your thing of, hey, does this person have CEO experience? They're
Yes,
grabbing
I
those.
do.
Yeah.
Now pay me or,
you go.
make it worth my while to stay or retain me, or I'm going to start getting the calls.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, they're going to start getting the calls no matter what. It's a question of how much the board wants to keep them, and if it comes down to compensation, then what needs to be looked at is what is market and what's not market. And when it comes to retirement and retention, what's market, what's not market, and that's real important.
Well, I go, is it really a hometown discount? For how long can you get that hometown discount? You know, if you hire them at a discount to market, it's their first time. I mean, Friday you're EVP on LinkedIn, on Monday you're CEO, and guess what? You're in a new batch of calls.
Title leverage.
It starts all over again.
It starts all over again, right?
Yep.
So, you know, we look at maybe some misnomers and semantics. And so we want on our next slide, I want to show you this idea of what it is not. So if you look at this the right-hand column here, this is what a lot of people still perceive, checking the box. I must have a succession plan. I must put something on paper and I must put it on the shelf. So it's not a one-time thing, and it's not the management. This is something you can't delegate. David.
No, it's a board responsibility. There's no question in my mind that this is a board responsibility, and it has to be looked at least every year.
Yeah, and then the idea that when I say succession planning, sometimes we immediately go, well, that's the C-suite and the AVPs,
number one, number
and
two,
it's
number
not.
three.
It's not internal. It's not just internal.
No.
I mean, I think every board should be on the lookout for up and coming, best and brightest, 30 under 30, 40 under 40 in their local communities, because those should have a head start on knowing your culture and your community, and they might not be internal.
But at the same time, after 38 years of working with credit unions, I have never seen a board skip a level.
Really?
Yeah. From what I mean by that is you're a vice president, and there's an EVP, and then there's the president. No one has ever gone from VP and skipped the EVPs to go to president.
The only place that I've seen it, and it's not in the credit union space, you're absolutely correct. It's in sometimes the Fortune 500 world when they need a bump on their stock price. They'll do a leapfrog, like somebody's running Asia and they're getting all this high profile. They put that guy in front of the whole thing, and hopefully that, creates some buzz. Totally unprepared.
There's a Peter
But it
principle.
looks good for a week or so.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's good for a week.
Yeah, yeah. And you actually could really, damage a really talented person that if we put them in the proper succession planning sequence, they could be great dividends. But the short-term fix rarely is there.
Well, if you think about it from that perspective, if there are a number of EVPs or even one EVP, and you've skipped over that EVP, and that person has a life in terms of a number of years to work,
right?
You've damaged that person as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've seen that sometimes with, do we go internal or external on our next CEO? And sometimes this is the wrong term, but help me, guys. Guilt by association. So he was, the second person. She was part of the C-suite team that got us here. We want to make a different direction as a board. Does that person come with some baggage?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that could be.
Yeah, but I agree. I've never really seen in the credit union where we said, here's a person that's 3 or 4 levels down, all of a sudden named CEO.
I've seen them apply. Many of them apply.
Well, this new generation is very confident.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I should have been CEO at least, I was, 10, 15? I should have been CEO by then.
oh, what, a D. Hilton?
Oh, anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Well, if you want to be,
David, close your
if you want to
ears.
be CEO here, just ask.
I'll hand that torch off real quick, right?
Okay. About ready to have an intervention with you, Jeff Rock. And then what it is, I think when we look at best high-performing credit unions, we go, it's a business strategy, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I mean, if it's not a business strategy, what part of the board's responsibility is a business strategy?
Mm-hmm.
They have to look for the next CEO.
How many times when we work with a client, we say, any action we take in back of the house, we want it to be seamless to the member?
Always.
Right. I mean, that's a
It's
litmus
always.
test, right?
That is absolutely always the case. But at the same time, how many times have you heard a board say, I know so-and-so down the street, and he's a great CEO, and we should put him on our radar to become our next CEO, not knowing anything about the person's background, not knowing really anything about the credit union other than what they can see.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
I mean,
and that may not be exactly what that is going on.
well, that's what I like about when you look at succession planning as what's the cliche? It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's you identify that person. Anybody looks good in a blue suit for a day. Anybody can look good on, the local paper cutting a ribbon or kissing a baby. But I want to see body of work.
Right.
I want to see years.
Anybody could look good in a white shirt and black pants.
I mean, proof and positive right here.
We need to share before we start. It took you 5 minutes to get your hair just that way,
Oh, absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I did not have that problem. So
Yeah,
And how many minutes did it take you?
no, actually, Debbie Hilton says I probably need to put some makeup on because it's probably a little shiny.
Oh, boy.
That's my cross to bear. But what it is, again, what we want to talk about, long-term commitment, not just annual, because you want to have that continuity year over year.
Oh, there's no question about that. You have to have it year over year. It's not a one-time
Yeah.
thing. It's not a document that you put away on the shelf. What it is it's a living document that has to be checked every single year or when someone leaves.
Now, pivot this to like, okay, I'm a credit union. One of my growth strategies is mergers, and I want to go after, deals and relationships. Doesn't the succession plan put you in a better position to have those negotiations?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it puts you in a worse position. If you have a CEO who's younger
Yeah.
and has more runway, and that could be threatening to the other CEO.
Oh, absolutely.
It may make all the sense in the world to do the merger, but that's what's keeping it back.
But if I'm planning that in succession planning, you're the other side telling me this. That's a great question. Let me tell you what we've done to address that. And so they don't assume that the person's coming, going, or are going to be out or leave. You're going to say, look, we know that was a scenario and we've dealt with it.
Right.
I'd rather do that in planning than the other side bringing that to the table as a strategic advantage or whatever.
Well, you have to first determine that it is an advantage.
Well, sure.
If it's not an advantage, then this is not the merger for you.
Exactly.
If it is an advantage, then I think you have to explain right up front, almost the first sentence that you mention, that this is an advantage. This is your way of getting through a succession plan.
Yeah. And whether it's age or contract or anything, just to be ready to address that with the other side, I think is going to put you in a good position to either. I never thought of it, but I like the way you said that. Is let's nip it in the bud quick. Let's don't do 6 months of this due diligence and then the deal breakers at the end of the deal.
How many times have you heard mergers started with operations?
Yeah.
Well, let's merge our IT systems,
Yeah.
and then we'll merge our lending systems, and we'll get around to looking at the people aspects of the merger later.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It's
Well-
people first.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's a situation where if I don't want to be confrontational, let's start with, we have the same IT vendor or software vendor, or, oh yeah, look, we have the same whatever. When are you going to get to the real question?
Yeah.
Who's
And the
gonna be
real
chairman?
question is, who's going to be the chairman?
Yeah.
How many board members are there going to be? Who is going to be the CEO?
Yeah.
And I love the whole concept of, okay, we have a succession plan, but you haven't checked in on it in the last 2 years or something like that. How many things did you just talk about have changed? How many people have changed? How their career progression has changed? I was looking at it as like, as an executive, you've probably gone through a bunch of training in your career, and you come back and you're invigorated and everything makes sense, and you put that training book on the shelf, and then you forget about it, and then you slowly go back into the old ways of how you were doing things. Checking back into that, it reminds you.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do with those training manuals?
Yeah. You just stick them up on they hold down the shelf, right? That's. But you have this new invigorated spirit, and if you don't go back to it, same thing with succession planning. You have this
Absolutely.
invigorated idea, you got to go back to it and talk about it, see what's changed.
So kind of our next topic is this concept of succession planning. It's not just semantics. I think it's overused, and it's a bigger concept than it actually is, because everybody lumps it under succession planning. And right now, I think the high-performing credit unions do two things really well. They separate contingency planning from succession planning. And contingency is what?
If this, then that.
Well,
A month, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, nothing anywhere near a year.
yeah.
But a short-term fix for a problem that you have.
If there's a medical issue or a leave of absence, I said it a few minutes ago, seamless to the member. We
Right.
have to wait on all this because the CEO is not in a position to make those decisions. That's not serving your members.
No.
But as David says, you get into a year. I'm acting CEO, and I've been doing it a year. And then you say, now we're going to do a CEO search because whatever reason the CEO is not coming back. What happens?
That's a real problem.
It hurts.
Oh, yeah.
Ouch.
Because you've had a great year, and you're acting CEO for that year, and now we're going to do the search. Nobody took into consideration the year that I was CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we always get the compensation question on this. Should we give a premium to that acting CEO during the period, or should we do something at the end of the period to say thank you or recognition? And my thought always is when you change a salary and then say, oh, guess what? You're not the next CEO, and I'm docking your salary back to what you used to make. It's an owie.
Yeah.
It's a non-win.
Yeah.
Yeah. But something at the end of the period to say, wow, you really shepherded us well. It was seamless to the member, here in recognition, whether it's a bump to retention or a bump to retirement or a one-time bonus is a nice technique.
I agree with you 100%. Doing something and then taking it back does not work.
And the caveat is when, you get into 9, 10, 11, 12 months, all the goodwill goes out the window.
I agree.
Okay, so on this slide, what we're simply talking about, when you look at contingency, there's going to be people coming at you as a board member, what happened and what you want to share or not share. It's good to have a plan. It's good to have one person as a media designation or a community designated to talk to the community. And this is a stretch, but the Women's World Cup in soccer or football, what do you call it, Jeff?
Football.
I don't know if everybody knows. Jeff was a professional soccer player for 12 minutes.
Yeah. Quote unquote, air quotes there.
Well, yeah, air quote. But the women are playing World Cup, and it's in Australia, and the premier player for Australia tore her calf. But the team was saying she has a calf strain, and then one of the players said, "Oh man, I don't know what we're gonna do. She tore her calf," and
The world lost their mind.
okay, the media people are supposed to talk about this, not you. First of all, a lot of ticket sales just went down the dumper. But it's that point is we're not going to speculate. It might be it could be an HR issue of why we're in a contingency period.
Yeah,
So
it's got to be a spokesperson that
yeah.
takes care of that whole issue.
Yeah.
It can't be everybody talking about it in different ways.
Exactly. And I mean, and if it seems not salacious but interesting, media is going to come in and why did they retire or why did they do this to have it just gives the membership peace of mind, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So did you tear your calf?
No,
Never?
I did a lot worse.
He played.
That's enough. Yeah.
Yeah, that
So-
didn't go well.
One of the things that we talk about, contingency versus succession and what you should do on an ongoing basis, we have a list of things here that we think are really strong tools that you can use internally or if you use a third-party firm. Get people ready for the process of recruiting. As recruiters, some of the worst resumes we've seen are the most qualified people because they haven't thought about it for 15 years, right?
Yeah. If you haven't done a resume, then why would you have a really good resume? And if you have a really good resume, what does that mean? That you've been sending that resume out on a regular basis.
And sometimes in our recruiting practice, we can tell when people have been coached, they have a coach. And sometimes you can be too good at it. So there's a thing like I haven't interviewed in 15 years and, I practice every 5 minutes.
Professional job seeker.
So yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So this idea of these are some of the tools that we think run people through exercises ever so often, like the job, how would we look at the job, how you'd present your qualifications. And because it's so multimedia today, we like to see them on tape. We like to see them on video. We like to see them in webinars, right?
Yeah, we'd like to see them on a video. We'd like to see them in a group setting. We'd like to see them in a large setting.
Yeah.
We'd like to hear their voice. Anything that we can do to make it more or more of a rounded interview type of a setting would be helpful.
And then this idea is, just take communication competency. You're great one-on-one. You're great in a small group. But now as CEO, you're going to have to talk to 1,000 people and really motivate a community. And if you're not there, that's a great thing in succession planning to identify as something they can work on.
And that is exactly something you can work on. You have to do an annual meeting. You want to get up there and talk in front of
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I shouldn't say this, but the only people who ever show up for an annual meeting are the employees. But if you want to talk to the employees at an annual meeting, then you have to have some large employee or a large group speaking experience.
And then and I know this, I'm cheating here. Your personal pet peeve is writing.
Yes.
Communication through the pen.
Most people cannot
or
write.
keyboard.
Keyboard.
Yeah.
Most people cannot write. And now with the advent of artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
they're never going to have to write.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you fix that problem, but it would be very nice to see a person's writing skills.
Well, it's an interesting transition. You go back 20 years ago, and we called it the PowerPointing of America. In business school, you learned how to write a beautiful PowerPoint. You didn't have to write, but you just had to have 5 bullets up there.
Bullets.
And now, trying to get people to write and assess, can they communicate via that channel? Tough. And now we're going to add AI to this and say, write 500 words on whatever. And all of a sudden,
AI generated 501 words
Yeah.
just for you.
yeah,
My
something
ideas,
correct,
yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then in the final selections, if we pivot of this is what you're doing every year to get ready in contingency, and then we move to now we're going to do final selections. And the things that can they look at questions and write strategically? Can they think about things? And we like using projects, right?
Right.
You know,
A project gives you a whole lot more sense of what an individual can do rather than just writing
Yeah.
for the sake of writing.
you know, if you talk to some of our clients, they go, "What's so interesting is you might give eight potential candidates the same question, the same set of data, and you're going to get 8 different approaches."
Yeah, and you're only going to hire one of those individuals, but you're going to have 7 additional documents that you can look at for ideas.
Yeah, good, bad, and ugly. And in that case, it's good to know what, heck no, we will never do that. Thank you for sharing that now, because it's going to be a long road to no as opposed to a quick no. And then one of the things we finally say is have internal people practice with mock interviews. Like I said with the resumes, if you're not going to be good, at least feel comfortable in that situation to get you to articulate your ideas and get them out there to the board.
Yeah, if you don't practice, it's like anything else in this world. If you don't practice and put the time in, you're going to get nothing back.
All right, so it's not a trick question. How many levels do you go down, David? How do you recommend? In succession planning, the board's looking at what?
The board should be looking at 3 levels. That would be my opinion.
Okay, so CEO,
CEO,
chief, C-level.
C-level, and then the level right after that.
Okay. And why that third level?
That third level, because you're going to have to, if you have a C-suite executive leave, that's a really important position, then the next level can fill that position if you have the right person.
And a question you told me that I love, it's not a trick question. It's like you're doing an interview and the CFO is going to become CEO, and you say, okay, you've worked hard. I think it's a natural progression. How are you going to back yourself up?
Yep. I think it's a really important question. Who's going to take your job?
Yeah, who's on the bench?
If you get promoted, who takes your job?
Yeah, because I want to launch this new CEO. I want them successful. I don't want them doing 2 jobs.
Yeah.
I can't get to this because I still have to do the financials, or I know that's exaggerating, but I literally had an interview before where I said, you're doing great, you're really ready to do this, but hey, who's backing you up? And the person literally said to me I don't think it's that big a deal. I'm going to do both jobs for a year and then I'll figure out.
Yeah, it doesn't work that
You're
way.
not ready for this. You don't know what's coming.
That's 2 jobs.
Yeah.
No,
Unless
it's
you want to work.
legitimately 2 jobs.
Yeah, if you want to work 16 hours a day, then that'll work.
Well, that's the CEO. What are you going to do for the CFO part? People, and again, that just shows, let's do mock interviews. Let's put them in situations in the contingency piece to see what the job is. Because something we haven't talked about yet, but I think it's kind of important is it's okay to say you don't want the job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are people that don't want the job.
But when I was coming up, if you ever said that, you lacked gumption, you weren't a go-getter, you're a deadbeat, and we're writing you off. So I had to say I wanted it. And today it's okay, right?
It's okay, and not only is it okay, what you're doing is you're sparing the board, in this case, time and energy. You're sparing yourself time and energy, and you're putting yourself in the position to tell the board of directors that you're very happy in your own position.
Yeah. And the board, conversely, should not think bad about that person.
No, absolutely not.
But when you talked earlier about, communication and getting to, in a merger, getting to the people, you can't assume that this is your next person if you haven't talked to that person wanting the job, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we come to communication implementation, our audiences are in some cases regulators. If there's a situation where there might be a financial issue where they're involved. We're not going to tell you who to pick, but we want to see who to pick. We've been in those situations before. The board, obviously, C-suite, and then staff. Talk about staff in this process.
Staff is probably the group that understands the least of what's going on.
Yeah.
They need to know that everything is okay, that their jobs are not in jeopardy, that the credit union is not going away, that the credit union is not going to get merged in, and the branches that they work in are going to be closed. They are the people that need to be told what's going on and in a truthful, honest way, what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, those with the least amount of information fill in the most amount of gaps with
That's
their
correct.
own misinformation. So, yeah.
And again, the correlation, that's not just at $1 billion shop. That can be at a $100 million credit union with 50 employees. Could have the same type of consternation or generate a staff that's, fear of the unknown.
Actually, it could be worse.
The smaller?
The smaller,
Yeah.
the smaller, the worse it could be.
Yeah,
Because
inverse,
then
right?
all of a sudden, two people say one thing, and it gets out to all 50.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it
it's the
can
whole-
go faster, I guess,
That's
too.
right.
Okay, that's a
It's
good
the
point.
differentiation of change happening to you versus change happening through you. So if
Right.
you're involved in the process, you feel like change is happening through you. You're involved in that whole process. If it's just, well, this is how it is, and this is how it's going, that's change happening to you, and immediately you're going to think negative is possible.
Okay. So now this is something that came out of the, Stanford. They looked at Fortune 500 companies and they go, look, credit unions that are I'm not credit unions, but large companies that are having trouble with CEOs rotating, poor stock performance. And they said usually what those companies are, they're slow to terminate CEOs. We've seen that in the credit union space. They're slow to hire a successor. Again, they fear and unknown, not only internally, but externally. What does the market think if you don't have decisiveness of transition? They probably don't have inadequate succession plans. And then finally, their pool seems fragmented, small, and this is whether it's a family business or a Fortune 500. So what happens is in succession planning, I think one of the key things for a credit union to do is you have to do realistic assessments and evaluations of the person in the chair.
Oh, absolutely. This is not a philosophical discussion.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is not a discussion based upon what ifs. This is a discussion based on reality.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, when we do staff work, the joke is if they have a pulse, we have a teller because we need to fill a teller slot.
Button a seat.
And, we have the problem at the bottom, but it just exacerbates itself at the top.
Yeah. If the foundation is weak, you're perched precariously on shaky ground from the get-go.
And I also feel that leads to maybe premium or overpaying people because I'm afraid to not make a change, on and on and on. So the succession planning starts with, CEO can tell us how long they want to stay, but it also we're owners of that decision as well, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that I tell our clients when I have the chance is it's not always better to have a long-term incentive plan that takes you to 65, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
It may be better to have a long-term incentive plan that takes you to 60.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's all you want to do is stay till 60, or maybe all the board wants is for you to stay till 60.
Well, I think the most valuable goes back to ask them. Don't assume that 65 or 67 is a magic number. Ask them. And then the second thing is, if you do multiple distributions of a retirement or retention plan, you have an exit strategy for both parties.
Right.
And
that's what you want.
Yeah. I mean, it makes the going away party a lot more fun when both parties agree it's time to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I hope we built the case to this point that we really think succession planning belongs in the boardroom and it's a board responsibility. And we want to make sure that you address some of these issues on an annual basis. And I think we've done a good, built a good case for that to this point. When I look at best practices, you asked me this earlier, ABR, what does it mean?
What does it mean?
Always be recruiting.
I was going to say, it's the famous is ABC, but always be recruiting.
That's only in the recruiting business is it is ABC.
And even AI didn't come up with that one. So what does that tell you?
There you go.
So again, what we want to reinforce to what we've talked about to this point is high five. We went through this great recruiting process. We got this awesome new CEO. We're going to take a year off. You start the next day. And David, you have a number of stories where people don't get there. They're hired, but they back out, they pull out after a year, they get their dream job someplace else. You've seen it all.
Oh yeah, horrible stories too. I mean, stories of people having to make a change and move halfway across the country only to die.
Yeah.
For lack of a nicer term, but actually die while they're eating pizza watching a football game.
Yeah, I mean,
you just don't know. You can't just forget about the recruiting issue the day that you recruit.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I guess we've seen it all.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, and our advice or counsel is just make it part of your just DNA that we're always looking at succession planning. We're always moving on, and again, the goal is seamless to the member.
And the last piece of my information is that the CEO should not take it personal.
Yeah.
If the board is continuing to do succession planning, it's not anything personal. It just has to be done.
I mean, your job is to mitigate risk. Risk of not having the top person in the chair, every day is a risk I'm obligated to my membership to address.
That's your responsibility.
What's personal about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the other things that we talk about is it's not just internal, it's external. We always, sometimes, because of supply and demand, and we're doing research right now that says we still have a lot of internal hires, which is great. But the idea is don't forget about some people want to come back. They were really great at the 4th or 5th level manager. They weren't ready when the job was open. They go to the West Coast and they make a name, and maybe they want to come back to Indiana. That's okay.
Right. They spent their time in AAA, and now they want to come to the majors.
There you go. Local ties. They got out of school. The economy just didn't let me do it here. They want to come back and take care of parents, aging parents. They want to, take care of the family farm as well as be CEO. And we've got to look at those folks too. So we typically counsel cast a wide net.
As wide a net as possible. And there's nothing wrong with coming back. There's nothing wrong with looking at people that just don't fit your thought process as far as being the next CEO. It could be anybody and everybody that you need to look at.
So again, when you said don't take this personally, I'm a C-suite person and I've been with you 10 years and you wanted me to go to school, I went back to school. You wanted me to take on a new assignment, I take on a new assignment. And then the board says, we're recruiting, we're using an external firm to do a nationwide search. And I feel
very disappointed.
But how do you, yeah, I am. But tell me how do you pep them up?
Well,
how do you keep them focused?
You can apply.
Yeah.
You apply as well, and now that you have all these tools that you didn't have a couple of years back, now you might be the next CEO. Now there may not be gaps.
Yeah, I love the from to journey.
Mm-hmm.
If we had this conversation 10 years ago, look how many. Nope, not even close. And look what you've done in the 10 years.
That's right. And 10 years is a long time.
Yeah, well, 5. Well, for some generations, 3 months. I don't know what it is.
Faster generations nowadays.
But that classic is, but that can't prevent you from, if the board is supposed to do a national search, an obligation to cast that wide net. Well, I don't want to hurt someone's feelings.
And all it is and sometimes is an obligation. They have to do the right thing. They have to do what's good for the membership, and that may be casting that wide net.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you're out of the net.
Yeah.
It just means that they're casting a wide net for the purposes of making sure that they get the very best candidate.
And then on the flip side, probably one of the top 5 questions you get from candidates, outside candidates, what's the board like? What's the board like? What's the board like? And this, don't they have an internal person?
Yeah.
And they're going to have to be answer that question as well.
Or they say, they don't ask the question, do they have an internal question? They say, I heard they have an internal question.
I heard.
Person.
Yeah. The rumor mill says that, so it doesn't so-and-so. I thought that was their job.
Right. And that you have to talk to those people a little bit differently and let them know that that it's not a done deal, that this truly is a search.
Yeah, I want my client to articulate that position of, we wouldn't waste your time, we wouldn't waste our time. This is a legitimate process to find the best and the brightest. And that's what I want to see. So let me show you real quick something I think that really looks good. Now, I'm not going to go through this a lot, but the idea is when you do an evaluation of the CEO, you can look at historical or how they did versus a plan. But I also think you need to start looking at competencies. And this is, for the C-suite attaining to be that top job. So you do talking about leadership and quality and what they do with how they deal with talent, because those are going to put them in position to be the CEO. So I think some of the things that are diminished or not given the full weight is look at your evaluation process and make sure that you're telling folks, if you want this job, that's the from to story you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And then if you don't want the job, then I'm going to make you the best technical professional. But it's good to talk about that in the evaluations as well. Gives you another piece of information. So we're going to end our presentation today with a couple of case studies. So one is a D. Hilton client, and one is from the Fortune 500 big bank world. So, David, if I told you that a credit union had 3 CEOs in a span of 6 years, not you, but the layperson would say,
That's a problem.
what the heck is going on?
Yeah,
right?
what's going on there?
What's happening?
But look at the scenario here, and this happened. You had a long-term CEO that started with $100 million, ended up with $1 billion credit in there for years. They hire a CEO, and then you take it from here.
Well, what happened then is that he found his dream job, which was a block away from where he grew up, and that was in California, which was way miles away from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And he took the job. The board came to him. The board of the California Credit Union came to him, asked him if he wanted the job, and he applied and went through the process and got the job. And then the next step was, how do we fill that position?
Yeah.
Well, they had a plan in place, and that was to promote from within. And promoting from within was exactly what they needed at the time, and that's what they did.
Yeah. So the idea is that internal person wasn't there yet, and they wanted to change. They get it. And then all of a sudden, if you don't have that talk with this person, like, look how far you've come, don't give up, there's going to be this opportunity. And lo and behold, there was the opportunity.
Right.
So don't let anybody say it never happens.
It does.
It does happen more than often. But the point of this case study was to share with the audience here is, if everybody high-fived after you hired Rudy because he's a phenomenal executive, and then this happened and you let your guard down, and then you would have this period of flat, and he left it in a great place, but still flat, not moving forward. But because they had that succession planning commitment, they filled it pretty seamless.
They did a great job.
Yeah. And this is going to be, I think, more frequent or more common in the future.
Well, to take it one step further, the typical CEO in the credit union industry only stays in their position for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
So 6 is not that far off, and
The normal,
it's
normal.
kind of within the normal range.
But I mean, that generation of the CEOs from the 50s and 60s met natural retirement age, and then you would see the biographies, a distinguished 30-year career, 40-year career. They started with a cigar box, and now it's $250 million. Those stories are going to be less and less.
Yes.
First of all, there's not as many credit unions, but yeah, that's 5 to 6.
Well, there's also not that many cigar boxes.
That's true.
Vape
Vape boxes. Yeah. Okay.
Large vapes.
Okay. Well, I got to get a better example. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then our next example is really interesting is how you can help and hurt your organization. So in 2021, at Chase, Jamie Dimon said, we're gonna name co-CEOs to run the retail stuff. 2 women. So he was checking all the boxes of inclusion, gender, equity, on and on and on. But the questions that these 2 female executives got, and still to this day, is, do y'all get along? I mean, we talked about co-CEOs when I started in '86 having to deal with this, and you put that on the Wall Street, arena, and it's like, let's make this pay-per-view, right? And so, and technically, you wanted it here, you got it. But then literally weeks after that, then the board signed him up for another 5-year stint.
Yeah, that puts those two women in a real strange position.
I mean, it could be two women, two men. It's not about the gender thing, but it just, is that, and if you look at his career, you could say, yeah, a lot of C-suite people have gone on to other organizations because they couldn't wait him out, and he can spin that to say, oh, I'm a great leader and a great developer of CEO talent. But in this case, I don't know if he served his organization well.
I don't either. I think the only time will tell.
And again, it will be time to tell. So if we recap again, thanks, David, for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'll join you anytime.
No, you will not.
You're right.
But I hope we've got the message across that we think this is a board responsibility. It's something that we do all the time, and the high performers seem to do this very well. So the stories were really interesting today because we've seen them, and we've seen replicating some of the same issues and challenges, and then we've seen the people that are really do this really well. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining. We do sincerely appreciate your time. We're going to hang around and answer some questions if any questions come in. Take a little time to be able to go through. So if you have any questions, go ahead and get those into the chat box. We'll be happy to talk about those. Also a great question, because this always causes some interesting thing. What suggestions do you have for a board when an external CEO candidate is selected and internal, say VPs, were unsuccessful? How does the board help manage that transition?
Go ahead, John.
After you. No, please. Age before beauty. I think we take the opinion as, I think it starts in the planning process, and I've seen you do this many times, is set realistic expectations up front. If you know the internal person is not capable, do you really go through the process and make it window dressing? Because it's so transparent. And that, and it's almost a double negative. Now, if they're really good and we just find somebody just a scooch better or better, and it's right for the organization, you make that decision, we can help with that. We can explain the deficiencies or how close you came or whatever.
I think you also have to be really honest with the VPs. Yeah. If they have a weakness in an area, not only can you tell them about the weakness in that area, but you can also get them some education, whether it be classes or courses in the area that they don't have the strength.
And I'm be real frank, is this person needs to be superior. It can't be neck and neck. This person needs to say, whether they admit it in person or when they're in their car on the way home, wow, I'm gonna learn something from this person.
Well, what I tell the candidates and the board is that if the internal candidates can't see the difference from them themselves
internally, right?
Yeah, they have to see the difference and know there is a significant difference between what they have to offer and what the external candidate has to offer. If they can't see that difference, then this was not a successful search.
And then phase two, and they talk about this transition as a good leader, a new leader. It's not their first rodeo. They're going to know they're going to have folks that are going to be on board from day one. There's going to be people that are just saying whatever they can to get in good favor, and there's going to be people that are going to be upset. You got to lead all three types of those folks.
Absolutely. So
it's not so bad to, as an interview question in the final piece, to say, let's talk a transition. You get this job, and there's folks on your staff that are very capable. What are you going to do with them? And then hear the story. Hopefully they've had some experience and background in that, and you'll have peace of mind that they're going to lead that.
And if they haven't had any experience, then that's something that you need to know as well.
Oh yeah, is it a wild card, or is it predisposed behavior, or they just have those innate or organic competencies that they're going to make everybody feel good and be on the same team.
Right.
All right. What do you recommend in a succession plan to build the competencies of second and third level leaders? How do we get them ready for that next step?
Well, in the D. Hilton core competency model, vision's on top. So in that third level, they need to get a taste of strategic planning and vision and futures and innovation. They might be good at execution of a plan, pre-described, if we do this and they do that. They need to get to that next step. So just as, David, your first story today was, you weren't allowed in the boardroom and you didn't know what happened and it was this magical or mystical place or whatever. What do you think third level people do.
Well, I think third level people need to make presentations
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
board.
And I think, and I would add to that, the committee work is a great kind of a transition step.
Right.
Be a technical resource to one of the committees, and get to know the board and types of questions they ask and the different personalities, because we're all working towards one goal. But there's the game of telephone. It's not filtered through your boss and then down to you. You get to see it.
And all of this happens only if the CEO has the ability and the desire to make it work.
Yeah.
They have to be confident in themselves that the number 2 person or the third level people are not trying to
Yeah.
take their job.
Yeah, this is not threat mode, and a good leader says, I hire people better than me and let them do their stuff, right? And I love that philosophy. Why would we not use it for this scenario as well? But to me, that third level is the most underappreciated or underdeveloped in this scenario. And hopefully today we've encouraged you. They're in play. We need them for the bench strength, but also for future leaders.
They seem like the biggest wild card, so a lot of people don't bother investing heavily in there, it seems, and that's just a big missed opportunity.
Well, that goes back to those governance models. Says you only have one employee board. You're not don't be in the weeds talking to other people or interacting. That's the CEO's job, and we're kind of saying baloney.
Yeah.
Today in today's environment and the sophistication of the businesses, that's a great resource.
And David, I think you made a really good point. When you were number 2 and you weren't getting in front of the board, you knew there was a very small chance that you were going to get that opportunity to kind of continue on from there.
Yeah.
And so having your number 2 and number 3 without that opportunity, if they're a strategic leader, if they're an intelligent leader, they're seeing that they're not being put up to the plate. They're not being set up to succeed.
And we know the next generation, the next 2 generation leaders, they want contribution.
Yeah.
To make the contribution. They're not going to sit on the bench.
And they will head on out pretty quick.
And
that's for sure.
if they are sitting around waiting,
Yeah.
they're going to eventually leave. It's not going to work.
It's not if, it's when, for
when.
sure. All right, I gotta stop talking.
All
Sorry about that. All in favor?
Before we wrap it up, let me just say one thing, okay? We had 4 questions. If you have more questions, John really likes to take questions after midnight. So his telephone
Can we put his
number at
email
home
address?
is 999-1234.
And then I had to speed dial to Jeff's when it's after 3 a.m. that
Mine
give
is
us
automatically forwarded back to David, so I don't know.
No. We love talking about this stuff seriously. And if you've got something, a board-specific situation coming up or a question you want to talk offline, because some of this needs to be confidential, we're here for you. And I think our experience in we honor those confidentiality understandings that the hypotheticals. Asking for a friend.
Yeah. For that
But
friend.
let me get into real quick before we run over time. Next, this format of having David here telling stories and examples from his career and my career and Jeff's career, we hope they're valuable. So next month our webinar talk is going to be executive recruiting and pitfalls. Just a quick insight on that.
Just really quickly, we've done over 200 to 2,500 searches. Not all of them are CEO searches, but we've done a significant number of CEO searches. And what I would like to do in August, probably late in August, so please watch for our emails and our advertisements. But what I would like to do in August is talk about those strengths and pitfalls of recruiting and how you can avoid some of the issues that come up during the recruiting process.
Whether you do this yourself or you have a third-party consultant help you, that's not what we're talking. This is not that. It's just unique scenarios because people are people, and just some things that you need to be prepared as you go through that. So to me, it's a natural extension of today's talk, succession planning, and now we're going to go find that next CEO, and those are the stories we'll be telling.
Right.
Or some advice. And,
Some advice. There you go.
and sometimes importantly, whatever you do not do this.
We've been there, done that.
Volume 1.
John made a T-shirt about it.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, thanks for the time to guys, and we're happy to answer any questions offline if you have them.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you for the questions.
Been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Of course, this recording will be posted on the website. Let us know if we need to answer any questions. Always happy to help. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.